Hello, Appalachian Championship Wrestling fans. We have a special edition for you today. We're going to be honoring the great Kevin Sullivan, and we have a special guest with us on commentary. I'm Nikki Walters. Mike Kelly is here, of course, and we're also joined by Moose, the owner of ACW. And we're going to go through a couple of Kevin Sullivan's matches and share their special memories behind the scenes of some of these events and why Kevin Sullivan was so important to Moose and Mike Kelly both. So, you guys, which match are we watching here first?
So this first one is from Rockstar, which hasn't been around for a few years, but at the time was a killer promotion in the Dayton area. I was not along on this trip. Moose took Kevin up there, and
so the way most of these trips would work is somebody would want to book Kevin for a convention, and then I would just call all these other companies and like, hey, I got Kevin Sullivan in town this weekend. Would you be interested? So we would just do a loop. Like I think this one we did Dayton, and we left Dayton and went to New Jersey, and then we did Allentown the next day. So we did a 3-day loop with Rockstar on this trip right here.
And then, just so that the fans at home know, they might have seen the post that we did on the day that Kevin passed, but you guys knew each other well. He stayed at your home often, but he's really one of the people that was pivotal in getting you involved in wrestling. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I met Kevin in 2013. It was a show in Nashville, Tennessee. I talked to a couple of my friends that were promoters to go up with me who had booked Kevin in the past. And I went up to Kevin at the end of the show and I said, hey, my friends have booked you a few years back and they'd like to book you again. He said, that's great. He said, I'd like to get out on the road again. And he took my number down, and the next week I was actually on vacation with White, and he called me, and I went in the bedroom, and 2 hours later I walked out, and I was just blown away. I told my wife, I said, I just spent 2 hours on the phone with Kevin Sullivan. I'm like, he's like the guy who created everything when I was a kid. And I remember first walking up to him, I was scared of him. When I was in Tennessee, like I was intimidated because I remember the Kevin Sullivan that I grew up with. And Kevin was family to me. I mean, I spent 6 years with him. I booked everything he did for 6 years. All his travel, he would come stay at my house.
Oh, Chris, not to interrupt. Is it you were talking about them fighting out into the road? Is this when this is?
Yeah. So this is Kevin Sullivan at its best. I mean, he always takes the match outside the ring, but this right here got pretty crazy. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but just keep your eyes on it. You'll see where Kevin takes this. And this kind of just describes how crazy Kevin was. Like, people sometimes look at him as like an old man, but he was still just as crazy at this time as he ever was back in his 30s and 40s. So you can see we are going into a 4-lane highway. This is in Dayton with Rockstar, which had one of the best buildings I'd ever been in. But you can see traffic is moving. They are fighting in the highway. This is a 4-lane highway.
Oh, wow.
When the traffic
yeah, traffic is literally stopped.
Yeah. So it's
my goodness. My goodness.
You can see here that, yeah.
So when I first heard about this, you know how wrestling, there's a lot of tall tales and exaggerations. Yeah. I heard like they fought out in the road. It's like, well, maybe they fought up to the sidewalk. I saw a car stopped a minute ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was 4 lanes of traffic in downtown Dayton.
And it had to be a trip for you to get to know Kevin as well as you did, as someone who grew up watching him.
Absolutely, yeah. It was. I mean, I learned all the insides and outs of everything in the business. Why he did, why he made this decision. A lot of personal things with. Marriages, different people he's been with. I mean, we talked about everything. We talked about a lot of personal stuff between brother. So brother was always the word. If you called Kevin, he would say brother, but however he said brother, he'd be like brother.
It could have 20 different meanings depending on how it was said in the context.
You knew where the story. If I called him and said, Kevin, what's going on with so-and-so? He'd be like, brother. You knew it was bad. You know what I mean? By the brother alone, you knew.
Oh, what's he doing? What's he got there?
Some type of spike.
Okay.
And so you referred to him as Uncle Kevin, so tell me about that.
He became like my uncle. I mean, I didn't really want to say he was my dad because that's just good. But he just was part of my family, and he'd come to my house. He slept on my couch.
He would stay up for weeks at a time.
Yeah, he would stay at my house. My wife accepted him. I mean, he was a caveman, though. I remember when Kevin would come to my house, I would buy his own cold cuts because the first time I bought him cold cuts, there was like a zip tie or a zip lock thing on it. He just ripped the package open. I can see his fingerprints all over the meat. So I said, "Hey, Kevin, this is your drawer. This is your cold cut drawer in my house. Everything here is yours." Because I would always call him and like, "Hey, what all do you want when you get here?" He'd be like, "I want a 12-inch Subway sandwich. I want a 6-pack of Heineken, and I want a can of Copenhagen or a Skull or whatever." And he'd get out of the car and he'd be sitting in the car, and I would feed him the whole time. But he had his own drawer in my house,
So you were talking a little bit about when you first met Kevin, him being a little intimidating, and I mean I get that too. Like where I grew up watching him, and he was such a wild man on television that like it was almost I was a little apprehensive approaching him. But then when he was out of character, such a sweetheart of a guy, super intelligent, just an absolute
and knew a lot about everything.
Man.
Knew about history, knew about sports. I mean, I learned more about history from that guy. I mean, he knew his history. He was a huge history buff and a huge sports buff. Oh, by the way, the cops got called. Like a little later in the show, like the cops come storming into the building. They I don't know how many cops came in. They actually laughed it off and were pretty cool about it. But they just told us, "Hey guys, keep it in the building."
What was your perception of who Kevin was versus who he actually was? Like, what was the one thing that blew your mind the most?
Just how nice he was. I mean, he's just the sweetest guy. Like, very caring. What was really cool is when my children were born. And they were little babies, and he's in there playing Gucci Goo. I remember I have a video somewhere of Kevin playing Gucci Goo with my kids, and I'm in the back like commentating, going, "That's the devil playing with my child right now." And the whole devil gimmick that went on, he's like, I'm Catholic. He's like, "I don't worship the devil." He said that I never said the word devil. He said the fans and the news writers used the word devil.
He was mad. He was mad at Bill Apter for using the word devil in one of those PWI articles. Because he was very vague. He wanted to let across like he was a cult leader, but no specific.
He was brilliant. So when John Cena was having a downward slump and the WWE Network was doing one of their big promotional things, I asked Kevin, I said, "What would you do to fix John Cena?" He said, "What I would do to promote the network," he said, "I would show him in the back continuing to watch Bruiser Brody videos and those beers roll out. And he's going to become more and more reckless, and then just show him in different areas of the country, and then he finally end up in the desert, and he had this whole big thing. He just immediately come out of his brain. I'm thinking, wow, like it's crazy how he was just quickly he was able to come up with something. That may not have been perfect, but somebody could have took that and ran with it. And it
was the beginning of a good idea, right? In like a creative mind.
He was a genius. I mean, he's an absolute genius in this business.
And quite surprisingly, if you knew his character from TV, a very sweet, nice guy.
Yeah, you can see him there laughing. He's just having a good time with people.
Okay, well, that first one, that was from Rockstar Pro, and that was against Granger. And we'll be right back here in just a second with another match.
All right, so we're back for another match. This time we're going to, New Jersey?
Morganville, New Jersey. This is a company called Wrestle One. It's actually a pretty neat company because it's a group of guys who are all good friends, and they all put their money together and run these shows and bring in big name guys. And, same deal, they called me up. They booked Shane Douglas originally, and I had Kevin there, so I'm like, yeah, I got Kevin Sullivan, so they went ahead and booked Kevin. He's working this little guy, and something will happen here in a minute. I'll explain what happened.
Is this the same promotion you're telling me? You said KTB was a regular at Kyle the Beast?
Yes.
Okay, yes.
It was actually really cool. They would draw 100 and some people, and it was a club. It was a group of them, like 15, 20 guys, and they put all their money together, and they run these nice little shows.
So they get some money together, and they maybe vote, be like, okay, we got this money. Should we bring in Kevin Sullivan this time?
Like this show had Shane Douglas, Kevin Sullivan, Virgil, which Virgil wrestled, Stevie Richards, Demolition.
That's a pretty stacked indie show.
Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
So there's Virgil's table. So Kevin decided he wanted to mess with Virgil and rib him a little bit, and well, there goes Virgil's table.
8x10s flying.
And there goes Virgil's table.
Oh, Kevin!
So you see Virgil's
oh man!
Oh, buddy. So as we were talking about earlier, Kevin did have a sense of humor.
Yeah, so this is a memorable match for me because something's going to happen here in a minute that this kid does. I just thought it was pretty cool.
So about the, I don't care, is this towards the beginning of your run with Kevin? I
believe this was in 2015.
Stay away from my gimmick table.
2014.
Now, for the people at home.
So here it is. So Kevin slung that guy, and you look up, and Kevin's looking up, and
wow,
he's way up on.
Oh wow,
And he totally missed Kevin.
Wipe that ref out. Wipe that ref out, and we see Virgil back there.
Virgil's still scrambling to pick up the pieces.
There's the agent guy I was talking about. I can't remember his name. Eric Sims. Eric Sims.
Yeah, Eric Sims.
I got the Eric part right.
Yeah.
So, just for the people at home, we're here in West Virginia. Getting Kevin over to the East Coast, he lived in Washington State on an island.
He lived
had to take a ferry.
He lived in the San Juan Island, so like every time I would book Kevin, you had to allow enough time for him to take like a 2-hour ferry ride over, and then catch a cab to the airport, and then you have to make sure his flight back would allow him enough time to get home. There was times that there was a couple times I had to fly. He would take the ferry over, and I'd get in a hotel room in Seattle the night before. It was never that easy to get him here, of course. Unless you could find that perfect flight, but being the West Coast, the time difference was sometimes pretty tough. But the good thing about Kevin was he didn't care to come out early, so I could fly him in a day or two early, and it didn't matter because he was always happy to come in early and hang out.
But good about making his flights and getting the times correct.
The only time Kevin ever missed a flight was that COVID deal. Maybe was that 2021? Maybe.
He had got COVID and then had an issue in the airport.
And he was made it to the airport, but then became very ill and couldn't get on his flight, if I'm remembering correctly. Was still trying to get on the flight.
Yes.
But, and that's what kind of professional he was. He was still trying to get on the flight. But he was so kind of out of it.
I never had to worry about Kevin. Kevin, to me, is kind of like Rhino. I always tell people, like, Rhino, if he's not there, he's either dead or he's I don't even call that. Kevin was saying he was always very good.
Okay. We got another match coming to you here in a second, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, we're back for another match. Can you tell me which show this is, Moose?
So this show right here is Remix. So how this happened was we were actually doing a signing in Cross Lanes at Sports Fans, and if I'm not mistaken, Chance Prophet maybe got hurt that day and couldn't be here, so he called me up and said, would Kevin be interested in working? And I was like, I don't know, maybe. I know the next day we were booked for Don West in Parkersburg.
And speaking of, that's Don West accompanying Kevin to the ring.
And Remix was not happy about that. I remember Remix not wanting Don West there, but they were like, well, due to Kevin, kind of helping them out that day, they went ahead and allowed him to walk out to the ring with him. We were doing an autograph signing at like 2 o'clock that day, and the guy, Chance, called. I think I'm pretty sure Chance called me and said, "Hey, is Kevin free?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're free." We negotiated the deal, and we left there and drove straight to Parkersburg. And
So where is this?
it's somewhere near Parkersburg, I believe.
So
Like in a parking lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I went to remix a few times, and Nikki did too. It was always an indoor show.
This was kind of one of their other shows. It wasn't a dog pound show like somebody. Maybe I don't think it was a fair, but somebody I think probably paid them to put on a show.
Okay. Now, was there admission at this, or was it a free event?
I believe it was a free event.
Okay.
What is going on here?
Kevin is waiting for
Kevin is hiding. Kevin is hiding.
And if you notice Kevin's shoes, he's wearing loafers. Like
That's great.
Because during this time he wasn't wrestling for.
Is that Steph Leppard? Is that Steph Leppard?
Probably is.
Oh, nice.
He wasn't wrestling for Don West during this time. He was only a manager, so he never had to have wrestling gear.
Okay.
So he's wearing
winging it.
His penny loafers and his socks, and he's wearing one of my Kevin Sullivan shirts.
And so, we were talking earlier about how Kevin does what he's doing here and goes out into the crowd often. Given the perception that fans had of him, did you ever see them like scramble and run in fear?
Oh yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, a lot of people were afraid of Kevin. I mean,
Hey! I was telling you, I was afraid of Kevin when I first met him. Moose was afraid. Moose ain't afraid of nobody. He was afraid of Kevin when we first met him, just because he was such a convincing character on television.
Yeah, and instantly me and Kevin hit it off. I mean, we were good from the moment. Like after the first time he came in for IWA East Coast. And we did a show in Nitro. I think he worked with Memphis that night.
Well, the first time he came in from IWA, he fought Necro Butcher,
Yeah.
and then after we met him, he came in and fought Mathis that time.
Right. Okay. So on that show right there, I maybe called you and said, "Hey, I spoke to Kevin. He wants to come in." So
we wanted to bring Kevin in to fight Mathis. The budget was a thing because Kevin was living out west. It was an expensive plane ticket. And you told me, and Moose is a very good business person. He finds a way to make it work. He's like, if you guys cover the plane tickets, I'll get him enough other bookings to where the rest of it will be a wash. And I was like, well, if you're able to do that, I'm all in.
Yeah, so we that we went. I remember we went to the Milton Flea Market. We met a couple people that were collectors, and they even signed 3 or 4 nice pieces for them.
So just out of curiosity, and probably the curiosity of people at home. So the thing at the flea market, did you arrange that with somebody like a vendor at the flea market?
Yeah, so I went to, whenever you said you wanted to bring him in, I went to the Milton Flea Market that weekend. I just walked around the Milton Flea Market and looked at anybody that I thought worked, and we have a signing.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I found a couple like baseball card collectors, and I said, "Hey, look, if I bring a wrestler in here, would you I think the first time that no one was in wrestling financially, I said, well, can you talk to the owners of this place and I'll plaster this place with signs and everything, and he's going to be here." And that's what I did, and we made a few $100s on that one, and so I can't remember where all we did go. But this one right here, like I said, we were sitting in sports fans in cross lanes, and
you got a call in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
Chance was supposed to fight Gory, and it's looking. I was not here for this. I heard about this. This is a stretcher match, apparently, an ambulance match. So you have to put the opponent on the stretcher and cram him into the ambulance. Okay.
I have to point out my friend Jimmy Hunt there taking pictures too.
Oh, Jimmy Hunt! I have
He's
not
right there.
heard that name.
He used to
I've
take
not
amazing,
seen him forever. Yeah.
Amazing pictures at wrestling shows.
Did Kevin get kind of banged up in this one? Am I remembering that correctly?
So this was the one where, unfortunately, Kevin was on several medications due to blood pressure and other things. And he came to my house and he dropped his pill box.
Oh.
And his pills got mixed up. And
Anybody who has older people on a bunch of different medications knows how bad that can get.
But yeah, so we'll let the match continue on and talk about it when it happens.
Okay. So he was a little under the weather because of his medication, maybe getting mixed up a little bit.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Corey, come on, you gotta get up.
Did Kevin have any euphemisms or things that he said, catchphrases?
Oh, brother.
Besides the various tones of
the
brother.
various variants of brother.
So a funny story though. One of the times I was with Kevin, I was like, "You used to use the golden spike. What was the golden spike?" He said, "Well, it was usually a railroad spike." I went, "Really?" I went, "There's a railroad that runs in behind my cabin." I'm like, "There's railroad spikes everywhere." He said, "Well, go get them." So I go up to my cabin and I get like 200 railroad spikes and I lay them out on the blue.
Oh, look, young Ron Mathis. Ron. Look how young Mathis is there jumping on Kevin. Sorry to interrupt.
There's a couple of shots here he takes that are pretty stiff. But so I lay all these spikes down and I spray paint them gold and we sold them all over the country. And I remember being at Parkersburg and like people didn't have a lot of money and we were selling them for like $50 on conventions. And I remember some kid coming up and I sold him one for like $5. And Boogie Woogie Man Jimmy Valiant always said, "Don't ever let him leave the table."
What are you talking about? You sold me mine for $100. Now, I do have one, but I stole it from Chris, so you know.
Yeah, there was a couple of those shots there that hit Kevin. I remember Kevin got hit a little too hard.
Did he?
Yeah.
Look how young Ron Mathis is there. This is really cool. So Kevin, where was it that he got injured in this? Was it from the dive or from the or what?
I believe it was when he was taking shots to the back. Somebody clubbed him a couple times a little too hard.
Okay.
Oh.
And then we got Jason Gorey up on top of the ambulance. I have heard about this match. I've never seen the footage, so I'm kind of... Oh my! That was pretty cool.
It's a pretty brave dive onto cement.
Almost definitely.
I think at this point Kevin actually needed an ambulance.
Right.
Was he affected from this from the rest of the trip?
Yes, on the ride home got a little scary. I mean, I was a little worried about him. He was home fine, but he was
a little banged up and worse for wear.
Yeah, he was a little ill on the way home.
When your blood pressure gets low, I mean, you start passing out.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Kevin stuffed in the ambulance. And
if I'm not mistaken, he sprayed the red mist. And if you'll notice on the next few shows, Kevin wearing that white shirt and had that red mist. It didn't come off whenever if we even washed it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. We'll be right back here in a second with another killer match.
All right, so now we're going to go back to 2014. This is in the Indianapolis. Is that what you said?
Louisville, Indiana.
Okay.
What do they
that
call
general,
it? The Kentuckiana area, I think is what
that
the
tri-state,
locals call
a different tri-state than this tri-state. But we're going to see Kevin Sullivan in a 6-man match, and it's going to include some deathmatch wrestling favorites at the time, including John Wayne Murdoch, who's one of my all-time favorites for years.
Yeah, I wasn't at this one. Moose was at this one. So, here comes, that looks like John Wayne Murdoch right there. We'll see so this is going to be like a special treat for me and Nikki, and it'll bring back some memories from Moose. Tell me some of your memories from this day.
So this was during a Don West movie. So back in 2014, Don West.
So not the Don West of TNA fame.
This is the Don West of Shinston, West Virginia.
Shindy Wrestling Shinston Don West.
ATWA. I like Don West. He's a good guy, although his counting when his crowd was always a little off. I never wanted to ask him to teach me how to count because it looked like 30 and he would say 178.
Yes, a lot of other wrestling promoters like ACW included, will maybe round up a little bit, but
we don't multiply by 10.
Yeah.
Right.
But Don was a good guy. Don booked Kevin the entire summer, so during that time, Kevin would stay with me. So this was a deal where I was just started calling promoters, and Ian Rotten called me and said, "Hey, I heard you have Kevin in town." And yeah, he said he's coming in. This was on like a Wednesday in the middle of the week, probably a Thursday, and I worked a job all day. Got off work, picked up Kevin at my house, and we took off to. This is right across the river in Indiana.
I'm going to bust your chops a little bit. Are you doing the camera on this?
I may have been doing the camera. This is probably early on in my career. I didn't know. I hadn't met Nikki Walters yet.
Before you professionally outsourced the job to others.
Hey, it's still better than that goof. Still better than that goof we had in Logan a couple weeks ago.
At least there is something
Yeah.
recorded.
He's hit the play button, so give him a little credit for that.
Her logo, the evolution of, I don't know what the evolution
Well, yes, but it starts off with the monkey, and then it goes to the man like super kicking somebody. Okay, so we got Kevin. I'm trying to
tell us.
I'm a big indie wrestling nerd. Let me see if I recognize. Is that who is that? I don't know. Here. Okay. All right. I'm going to
look it up.
Google. I'm going to Google who is in this match. While y'all talk, Nikki.
All right. So
I do recognize John Wayne Murdoch. So tell me. So Ian Rotten called you. Had you talked to him on the phone before? Did he get your number from someone else? How did that go down?
Someone gave him my number. He contacted me. But I'd heard a lot of bad things about Ian not paying, so I negotiated the deal. And Kevin came in for a decent rate because he was already in town. And I told him, I was like, I'll cover trans, I'll drive him out there. Because it was 3 hours from the house. And at this point in time, I was newly married, and my wife really didn't care what I did. I didn't have no kids, so I was all about just going wherever with Kevin. So during some of these Kevin Sullivan loops, we would do a flea market one day. I remember one day we went to Bobby Blaze's house, and I kept telling Bobby, I said, I'm coming to your house one day. He said, you're not coming. And I said, I'm coming next week with Kevin. And he's like, oh, you're not coming. He said, we train on Monday nights. So I called Bobby that day and said, I'm coming. He's like, you're not coming. And I showed up with Kevin Sullivan at his house, and Shane Storm was there, and all these guys were training. What was funny, though, there was about 30 people there. So Bobby believed that I was coming because there was like 30 people at his house. I get there like a party, you know what I mean?
Right.
And like most of them were not trained.
Right. And so what was, when you were traveling, what was Kevin Sullivan's go-to like gas station food purchase?
That's a good question.
If I had a sandwich and a sub sandwich, it was always that. Doritos, like Pepsi. Heineken was usually, he'd only have 1 or 2 beers, but he liked Heineken. He'd drink anything. He'd drink Bud.
Yeah, I remember Kevin. He'd drink a beer. I never remember Kevin drunk.
No, Kevin never. No, I mean, I've traveled with Kevin for 12 years. I've never seen Kevin never got drunk.
Okay, I found. I had it a second ago. So it was this match: Ace Perry, Christian Skyfire, and Kevin Sullivan versus John Wayne Murdoch, Reed Bentley, and Trip Cassidy. And this is at the Jammers Roller Dome in Clarksville. This was the same place Ian and IWA Mid-South were running at the time.
Right.
Yeah, they were actually advertising a show for that weekend. And I believe maybe a month prior to this, Ian ran a show that involved Jeff Jarrett, and I believe there was some kind of debacle there.
Oh, I remember hearing about that. There was maybe a little issue.
People were not paid.
Now, when you showed up to the venue with Kevin,
I had my hand out, And anytime I went to any of these shows, I walked in with my hand on my face. You know what I mean? I made them pay me immediately. That was my deal. It was never a problem.
Now, I am remembering one time, Chris, that there was a little back pay with Kevin, and we had to go somewhere. We won't mention any names, But I remember me, you, and Kevin going to meeting somebody, a promoter, for a lunch that owed Kevin maybe a couple grand or something like that.
Well, that right there was not my doing, because one of the shows we were at prior to that show, Kevin took it upon himself to talk to the promoter, and he's like, "Oh, here's my number, call me," and they cut me out. So the moment I got cut out, I looked at Kevin and I laughed. I was like, "Well, if you don't get paid, that's on you."
So you weren't there to have your hand out as soon as you got to the building.
Well, no, I was there, but Kevin had worked the deal. So during that night that you're talking about, he did not get paid. I remember going to the promoter and being like, "Hey, you got Kevin's money?" And the promoter was kind of like him hauling around. And there was two doors going to the locker room, and I remember him walking in one, and I immediately walked in the other, and I heard him back there cussing, and I turned and looked to my right and saw me, because he was pissed because I was asking for the money. And he ended up paying Kevin 2 days later when we drove up, stopped in Parkersburg, and had lunch.
At a very nice brewery,
Yeah.
and I remember our lunch was paid for and all that good stuff. Was that the same day that we went to the NFL Hall of Fame?
We went to Cleveland.
And we went to Cleveland to see the Indians play Kevin's Red Sox. Kevin was a huge Boston Red Sox fan. I think we got to see Big Poppy there that day in Cleveland. And reminds me, I'm sure Kevin would have been very pleased to know that the Red Sox in Boston put a tribute up to Kevin on their scoreboard after his passing. Which is that's a big deal. And Kevin, he was a big deal. This guy, he hung. He'd hang with us and eat at gas stations. But I mean, let's face it, the dude was brilliant. The dude was a millionaire. He lived on an island you had to take a ferry to. But he was also just like a regular dude. He's just like a regular dude who just happened to be brilliant at pro wrestling.
And he didn't want fix. I can remember being at my house like, "Hey, Kevin, you want to go to Fireside Grill?" He said, "Let's just go to a couple hot dogs." But he was a real simple guy. This is a typical Kevin Sullivan match. He takes him outside the crowd and beats him up with chairs, and most of the time never stayed in the ring. If you watch any Kevin Sullivan match, he never stayed in the ring. And most of them, this is probably the longest match in Kevin Sullivan's.
I wanted to circle back around and make sure everybody understood that this was not the show where payment was an issue.
No.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear in case they popped in the middle of your story there. To make sure.
No.
Yeah.
Ian paid me immediately. He was great that day. We actually sat for like 2 or 3 hours before the show and talked, and Ian told a lot of stories about the early days of ECW. Ian was a blast that day. During that day, I remember Ian got involved at some point, and his son was there, and Ian flipped the table and cut a promo for a show coming up. I don't think Ian was really. Actually, that's Ian sitting right there.
Oh, is that Ian right there?
Orange bandana.
Yeah, with the orange bandana. Where are you at, Chris?
Behind the camera.
Oh, okay. You're behind the camera. Okay, I didn't know.
This brilliant camera.
This ain't too bad.
Yeah,
and this is cool.
Yeah.
Nikki, what do you think about seeing young John Wayne Murdoch from 10 years ago? And you got to figure John Wayne Murdoch is kind of geeking out on wrestling Kevin Sullivan.
Right.
Absolutely. Kevin was a hardcore wrestler in a different kind of way. You know what I mean? Like when you think about that era, the guys that influenced this generation of hardcore wrestling, that generation's, you think about Bruiser Brody, Kevin Sullivan, Abdul the Butcher. Kevin wasn't, always just gigging himself, bleeding all over the place. He would bleed and use that spike. But his contribution to the hardcore wrestling is more like these crazy brawls out into the crowd. That you still see to this day.
He learned it from Eddie Graham. So all ECW was an evolution of Eddie Graham. All that was learned from Eddie Graham. So Paul Lee learned from Kevin early in his career, and it all came from Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham, I think, was the first one to have the concession stand brawl, and then Memphis started going. And then years later, ECW.
Kevin talked a lot about Eddie Graham, taking him under his wing,
Yes.
taking him out on his boat, and talking about, the booking and stuff like that. So Kevin, I mean, he was a brilliant guy, but he learned this stuff from somewhere, and he learned it from Eddie Graham. Yeah. But Kevin was smart enough to be able to absorb this information and apply it.
I remember fans asking Kevin, who was the greatest promoter of all time? And people are naming, Eddie Graham. And Kevin would say, honestly, guys, it's Vince McMahon. He said, Vince McMahon is the greatest promoter. He said, but who influenced me the most? He said, I put Eddie Graham right below Vince McMahon. He said, if you had it, put Vince McMahon at the top. He's done more than anybody. He said, but Eddie Graham was a brilliant mind. Dusty Rhodes, all those guys came from Eddie Graham. Eddie Graham was able to see outside the box and create a lot of the crazy things that wrestling involved in.
So the first I was really aware of Kevin myself was Kevin wasn't on my local television. I grew up watching, with my grandparents, the Mid-Atlantic and the ICW stuff. And, like, when I first started reading the magazines, though, Kevin and Dusty were in the middle of that huge feud in Florida. And, Kevin doing the whole thing, like, and being topical and smart, and the whole satanic panic during the 80s. Well, what's he going to do? He's going to become a cult leader.
Right.
And never use the word Satan, though.
But he knew it was a hot topic.
Yes.
He knew it was a hot topic out in the world. So he said, use that. And they said, everyone said Satan, but he made people believe that he was running a satanic cult. Because he would use some of the symbols, like the snake and every once in a while, I don't know if he ever done the devil horn things with his fingers, but he would do things to make people.
Well, there was a heavy metal band, Nasty Savage, from Florida. That was one of the early kind of thrash metal, real heavy metal things. And Kevin would go to their shows and bring them onto the television. That kind of and that kind of dynamic. To maybe imply that it was, going on without actually getting there. Because at the time, that kind of stuff would maybe get him in trouble with their TV and stuff like that. So Kevin knew how far he could take it without getting in trouble. Okay, so that was, Kevin on the mic.
All right, we'll be right back with you for another match. Stick around. All right, we're back for our last match in this episode that's honoring Kevin Sullivan. This time we are at the very first H2O show, and that is a wrestling promotion that's owned by Matt Tremont, who's a legend in the deathmatch wrestling world. And this was his first show before he had a building of his own to run the shows in. And Moose, tell us about this match and this show.
This was another one of our crazy loops. This was centered around a Legends of the Ring convention. So coming up Friday, Tremont would always call me. He would see Shane and Kevin booked on the convention. So we would stop in on Tremont's on Friday. And this show was stacked. I mean, Joey Janela, Sonny Kiss, Eddie Kingston. I mean, there was just a ton of people that were first starting out. But like I remember this loop, we did H2O on Friday. We did Saturday morning at Legends of the Ring. Left Legends of the Ring.
Pro Wrestling Syndicate.
Went to Pro Wrestling Syndicate.
With Necro Butchers at the time retirement match. You remember that?
And then we left that one and went to the other one with...
what was that one? Was that wasn't...
It was Pat Buck's company.
Yes, and that was a killer show.
Yeah, and then we
killer crowd.
We went to Pat Buck. He had Jeff Jarrett, and he had recently Aaron Stevens had just been released, and Colt Cabana. And then the next day we went to Allentown and did the Allentown convention. So that was kind of one of our loops. So you did a Friday show the Saturday convention, the Saturday early show, the Saturday night show, and then a Sunday convention. Then we would drive home.
Here's what I remember. I remember we went to the Pro Wrestling Syndicate, got a signing on the pre-show. We had enough time to make it to intermission of the next show.
Yes.
And these things were maybe 45 minutes apart, but just with the population of the area and just, the amount of wrestling fans.
Every show was packed.
Yes, absolutely.
But people were having to pick and choose. And like I said, Pat Buck, who was once involved in Pro Wrestling Syndicate, had split off. Now this right here was, I think, like I said, Vice TV was here filming that night.
This was a big deal for Matt Tremont. Like, this was a dream match for Matt Tremont. I mean, you can imagine his very first show,
yes.
Of his company, H2O. And so he is going to handpick his opponent, and it's Kevin Sullivan.
Yes.
So that shows you, like, what Kevin meant to Matt Tremont.
I believe we set this up in Dallas at WrestleCon. When I think, if I'm not mistaken, the show was called "It Must Have Been a Dream." Or
yes.
He had real cool shirts printed up.
Sage Ozawa, like one of the best wrestling graphic designers from Japan.
Yep.
Did I'd love. Do you have one of those shirts, Chris?
Yes.
Did you grab one?
Yep.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Just to kind of
Tremont was always a pleasure to work with. I never had to worry about nothing. I never walked in with my hand out expecting my envelope. I mean, like, he was perfect to work with, and he's another guy that, like, you see this persona on TV, and then you meet him in person. He's the sweetest guy on the planet. But he runs really good shows. I always had a good time.
I watched this last Saturday night. I watched H2O on IWTV.
Yeah.
He's still putting out a heck of a product. And this is just awesome looking at this and knowing that we were at the first one.
Yeah.
And that Kevin and Shane were such a big part of the early days of H2O.
Shane was his first champion. And I believe we went back in December of that year, I believe.
Here's a little piece of trivia. Do you know what Matt Tremont's dog is named?
Oh.
Sully.
Yes.
And it's named after Kevin Sullivan.
So I remember the next time we went to Tremont's in December, Kevin was on the opening segment, and I had to get him across town 2 hours away. And I remember we walked into a show, and Big Man Anderson. It was Crowbar and the Tokyo Monster, Cohagas.
Okay.
We're in a match, and Anderson, blonde-haired guy that always travels with Kevin.
Gosh.
Andrew Anderson.
Andrew, yes.
And I was on the phone.
Alias Purple Haze, Andrew Anderson.
I was on the phone with Andrew trying to get directions. We was trying to find this building. And I remember, like, he was saying, Moose, we're getting ready to go out to the ring. I'm like 5 minutes away, and we're driving around trying to find it. And I remember they were in the ring when the match had started, and Kevin just goes right in and goes right into character, takes his belt off, and, like, slaps Crowbar in the face. Like, no one even seen Kevin coming.
So Kevin didn't come out of the locker room because
he come out of the car. He come out of the car. Like, we pulled up to the front of the building. I just threw the car and parked, jumped out, and we didn't even park the car. And Kevin went in, just went right. The match was already going on.
Moose, the New Jersey concession stand brawl. We were there.
Yeah.
We were there. I remember there being some Little Caesar. You know how I feel about pizza abuse. I remember there maybe being a little bit of Little Caesar's pizza abuse at this, Nick. Oh, God.
This was so
So, Moose, go ahead and tell us about your best ever or most favorite Kevin Sullivan experience or moment or memory.
Okay, so we're driving to Pikeville, Kentucky. So Kevin's at my house with nothing to do.
I remember this. This is great.
It was another one of those week-long trips, and I said, hey, Kevin, you want to go to a TNA show? He went, sure, why not? So we get in the car and drive to Pikeville, Kentucky. And I remember we got to the building, and we walked up to the counter, and I was just going to buy tickets. And the lady just looked at me, and she handed me free tickets. We don't even know why. She just handed me free tickets. I'm like, thanks. So we go up into the and sit down. We're sitting kind of in the upper deck, just kind of away from everybody. And I told Kevin, I was like, you want to try to go down and see if you can see anybody? And
well, we're in the bathroom now.
so Bubba Ray was in the main event.
Yes.
And I remember we walked down to the railing, and I'm standing behind Kevin, and I'm waving him up. The match was over, and Bubba was like handing out tables to people, and I'm waving at him like this, and I'm pointing down like this, and I'll never forget. He looked and he went, "Is that fucking Kevin Sullivan, the Prince of Darkness?"
His eyes were big.
Yeah.
You could tell, you know, and somebody like Bubba, he's seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And you could tell, like, the look of just, what the heck
he stopped
on his face.
I was pointing down, and he was like, "Is that Kevin Sullivan, the Prince of Darkness?" And he come down, and he hugged him, and they talked for a second, and then we went backstage. And then, of course, everybody come up and talked to Kevin, and that was a neat experience. Also, the first time I met Mick Foley, the same thing. It was at the Huntington Comic Con. I brought Kevin in, and we walked up to the table, and Mick's just sitting there kind of looking down at the ground, and he sticks his hand up and like just shakes Kevin's hand like he's a fan, and then he realized it was Kevin Sullivan. And then he like loses his mind, and they sit and talk for... That's probably my two favorite just Kevin moments. Just seeing the reaction of people, and you just... Everywhere we went, people who've seen Kevin, that's the reaction he got.
Kevin had so much respect that if you were friends with Kevin, you were cool. You know.
I remember being at WrestleCade, and like Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and X-Pac were there. They were the biggest things that had ever come there. And we're just sitting in there at the Marriott having lunch together with those guys, and they loved Kevin. I mean, they absolutely adored the guy.
Well, I mean, Kevin was the booker during that era, to you know, where they
when they brought the
biggest thing in
baseball
the world.
bats out, they said, "Do we bring the bats?" And Kevin's saying, "No, don't bring the bats." And he's shaking his head, "Yes." You know what I mean? Like, because they were telling him, "Don't bring out the bats."
I want to get a couple other quick questions in. Looks like we're rounding out this last match and this episode. So what mark did Kevin Sullivan leave on the wrestling world? And both of you can answer.
In my opinion, he created the biggest story angle ever. He changed the business. In 1996, wrestling was, I think, dying. I mean, being live on Monday night was okay, but no matter what happened, no matter DX, whatever, Goldberg, anything, it would have not have happened if they wouldn't have created the NWO angle, which is the biggest angle in wrestling history, and bring over Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and turning Hulk Hogan heel. And, you know, at another time I can tell you the whole story with Hulk Hogan, but Kevin had to stay with Hulk Hogan the night before the show and keep his agent away from him. His agent did not want Hogan to turn heel. This is public knowledge. But he stayed with him and make sure that Hogan turned heel. And no one knew Hogan was turning heel. There was only a handful of people that knew. But yeah, that was the most important move in wrestling history. You wouldn't have the wrestling you have now if it wasn't for that.
And then how many seconds do we have left?
We got about 30 seconds.
All right, so real quick, what would Kevin Sullivan want his legacy to be? What would he want to be remembered for?
Just that he was a brilliant mind,
and a nice guy.
And everybody respected him. Everybody liked him, and he never screwed anybody over. He was well liked, well respected.
He was one of those guys.
And believable. He was probably the most believable wrestling character in the history of wrestling.
Okay. Thank you, ACW fans. Thank you, Kevin Sullivan.